My name is Jim Peters. I was born in Biloela in 1941. My parents were Vasiliki Pataka and Emmanuel Lefteri. My mother came from the village of Paradisi, which overlooks the airfield, and my father came from Sideros. They were basically subsistence farmers, just living off the land. As you probably know, Rhodes was occupied by the Italians in 1912. Conditions in Rhodes were very difficult with the Italian occupation. There was significant oppression of the local population and significant hunger at times. My uncle, Philip, emigrated in 1924 in company with Mr. Stati and Manoli Paraskevas. He then supported my father's immigration in 1927. My father came out on a passenger ship in 1927 and landed in Fremantle. My uncle and my father moved to the Biloela district in the early 1930s and took up cotton farming as basically share farming after clearing land. My uncle returned to Greece and chose his bride Arkundula, and they returned to the Biloela district. My mother had an arranged marriage by correspondence with a Mr. Scuflis in Thangool. She arrived in Brisbane and met Mr. Scuflis, but did not approve of going on with the marriage. So my mother became a burden on the Greek community as a single, unattached person. She was then matched with my father, and they were married in Biloela in the mid-1930s. In those days, Biloela had a significant Greek population, and I'm sure it's by word of mouth they decided to go wherever there was significant, where there were prospects of work. The price of cotton fluctuated markedly, and eventually it became uneconomical, and so there was a shift to dairying. My father, Mr. Stati, purchased a property of approximately 600 acres, 4 miles from Thangool. However, Mr. Stati decided to come to Brisbane, and so he sold his share to my uncle. My uncle had 4 children and my father had 4 children. I am the first son. My sisters' names were Irene, Tina, and then there was me and my brother Peter. I remember my parents were always occupied in some way, trying to advance their lives. My mother never stopped work of one form or another. She was always sewing or working in the vegetable garden. We had a full range of vegetables. We virtually lived on the vegetables that my mother grew. We had a number of fruit trees of various kinds, supplying all the fruit that we needed. We even sold some vegetables to the local grocery shop. We also had chickens and occasionally slaughtered cows and pigs for our own meat. One of the things I enjoyed on the farm was my horse. I developed a great respect for animals, and my mother also had a lot of sympathy for animals. I remember the horse we had that I rode around the farm. All I had to do was show the horse which cow and which gate, and the horse would automatically cut out the cow and put it through the gate. I said to myself, there's something going on between me and this horse. There's some communication I don't fully understand. I remember we had a refrigerator, an Electrolux refrigerator, which ran on kerosene and provided some cooling, but it wasn't that efficient. So my parents left an example of looking after family and providing, and also being involved in the community in some way. My father was involved as a committee member of the Pan-Rhodian Society in Biloela and also in West End, where he helped establish the Colossus Hall. In 1943, my uncle suddenly developed an acute illness and died, leaving my father with my mother and Askundula and 8 children on the property. The farming consisted of dairying, pig production, grain crops, and some cotton. We spoke Greek at home, and when I went to school, I could only speak Greek. I remember my teacher trying to teach me how to read, and she did not understand that I could only speak Greek. And she got fairly angry with me and would sometimes hit me with a ruler because I seemed to be stubborn and would not learn how to read. However, in 1958, I passed the scholarship exam and then went to Rockhampton Grammar School for 1 year as a boarder. My father then decided that I should join my sister, who had married Tony Gallus and was living in Annerley, and I attended the Salisbury High School for the next 3 years, passing junior and senior. All my student friends were going to university, so I decided to go to university. I wanted to do science, but my father asked me whether I would do medicine. This was quite a shock to me because I knew the course would be very difficult. And I said to myself, well, I'll do it, but watch me fail. There were 180 students in first year, and of those 110 survived their first year. I remember the support my mother gave me during a difficult time studying. She would always have my meal ready at 6 o'clock every day. That enabled me to start studying at 7 until about 11 to 12 midnight. During the final years of my medical course, I became acquainted with Vivian Fracchia, who was a student in the same group. Vivian and I graduated in late 1964. Our first jobs were at the Princess Alexandra Hospital. And at the end of that year, we married had our honeymoon in North Queensland and then drove back down to Townsville to take up our second year as resident medical officers. I then developed an interest in ophthalmology, and my first year was in Adelaide at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. My following year was at the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, where I was trained in ophthalmology and eye surgery. I finished my specialist qualification at the Mater Hospital in Brisbane and then moved to Cairns, where I entered private practice. The most important part of my work as an eye doctor was treating people for cataracts. I followed the advances in cataract surgery, and in the late 1970s I developed an interest in cataract surgery associated with implanting a plastic lens inside the eye and restoring vision completely. Every year I would attend conferences in ophthalmology, and I noticed the ongoing advances in cataract surgery. I decided to go to America to be trained, and I visited several surgeons, one in Texas, another in New York, another in Los Angeles. At one conference I saw an American surgeon performing cataract with lens implants effortlessly. I asked whether he would train me, and he agreed. So in 1980, Vivian and I, with a 3-month-old son, Gregory, travelled to Oregon. So I spent a week with him in his surgery and watching him operate at the Medford Hospital in Oregon. I then returned to Australia and purchased a machine costing approximately $20,000, which I had air freighted over from the United States. I then approached a local veterinary surgeon in Cairns to get access to stray cats which had been euthanized, so that I could practice the surgery on cats and refine the technique. I then started operating on humans with a lens implant. This resulted in immediate restoration of normal vision within a day or two. The procedure was considered to be quite controversial, and I was labelled the cowboy from North Queensland and criticised by my professional colleagues. It took approximately 10 years for the procedure to become established as the standard cataract procedure. I demonstrated the surgery in Adelaide, in Perth, and also in South Africa. So my work in ophthalmology was recognised, and as a result I was nominated for the Order of Australia Medal, which I received in Government House in 1995. When I was working in my practice, I remember picking up a card for my next patient. His name was Ali Watt. So I called him in and I said, "You're from Thangool. I remember you because in 1946 you drove the cream truck up to our dairy and got bogged in the paddock. And I remember the truck because it had 4 lights that worked. The engine was quiet with a muffler. And the surprising thing was you could start it by pushing a button." And he said, "Yes." He said, "I went down to Brisbane after the war when the Americans were getting rid of their trucks on the black market. They painted the trucks with blue paint, and I drove the truck up from Brisbane to Thangool to carry the cream." In Thangool, the school was next to the airfield, and I used to watch aeroplanes landing and taking off. And one of the things I decided to do was learn how to fly. In 1975, I purchased a twin Comanche aeroplane, which is a twin-engined aeroplane, which has a speed of 160 knots or approximately 180 miles per hour and a range of 800 miles. And I have flown it all over Australia. I have also flown it to New Zealand and several times to Papua New Guinea. I found flying challenging and satisfying because of its technical requirements. I was involved in a Comanche group of approximately 5 aeroplanes, and we flew several safaris over Australia and also into New Guinea, and one via Lord Howe Island, Norfolk Island, and down to New Zealand and back. Another trip we did was from Coffs Harbour to Lord Howe Island, Norfolk Island, and up to Noumea, and along the Ring of Fire up to Rabaul, and then into New Guinea. In 1975, I travelled to Greece with Vivian. We went to Athens and I met my cousins there, and I also went to Rhodes. We arrived at the military airfield and got a taxi to Paradisi, where my mother was holidaying. I remember getting out of the taxi and talking to one of the ladies on the street. I asked her where my mother was, and she gave me directions. And then she ran up the road exclaiming, "Irthane, Irthane." So we found where my mother was staying with her sister, and we were put up in the main bedroom. I remember seeing lots of photographs where my cousins in Greece had tracked our lives in Biloela and in Brisbane. It was amazing to see how accurately they had kept the track of our lives and how much they knew about our families. The aircraft I flew was a Comanche, and there's an international Comanche society where owners of this aeroplane meet and have meetings. One of the meetings was in Thessaloniki. I arranged to meet an American owner in Athens, and we took a car trip with Vivian and his wife through the Peloponnese. From Athens we drove to the Corinth Canal and then north and across up to Thessaloniki. I've also done some car tours of Italy, France, Spain, England, Scotland, the United States, Canada, Alaska. Well, the professional highlight was bloody Oregon, wasn't it? Professional highlight. The places where you have some sort of attachment to would have to be Greece. Oh, I got the red carpet treatment, mate. Wherever I went, you go into a shop and you start speaking Greek and they say, don't even pay the bill, you know. On the farm, we occasionally went to the movies. It was the Regent Theatre in Thangool. And the movies would generally be a Gene Autry or a Roy Rogers movie for the first movie, and the second movie after interval was a more serious movie like Red Skies of Montana. The Overlanders.
The spirit of a great and young continent breathes in every exciting minute of this picture, with a new star with a different kind of personality, Tough Chips Rafferty. Australia's Northern Territory is an endless, deserted waste with unexpected patches of beauty. And across those scorching plainlands, Dan drove his great herd of cattle a distance from London to Moscow.
12 o'clock high. Most actors have egos too big for their boots, eh? I mean, they're all. I mean, have you seen anyone who's got power that doesn't use it? You're not allowed to have girlfriends as a Greek boy. You weren't part of the community. You weren't. You were in a small Greek group, and the rest of the community was sort of separate. In 1948, on the farm, my father bought a radio which was installed by the son of a Russian immigrant. The interesting thing was this Russian immigrant studied radio by correspondence from a London correspondence school. He sat for an exam at the local post office, supervised by the postmaster, and submitted his papers by correspondence. Got his radio licence, and he installed our radio on the farm. I remember how fascinating it was to hear these voices from hundreds of miles away, and all the serials, Superman, Hop Harrigan, The Air Adventures of Biggles, When a Girl Marries, Tarzan. It was a fascinating glimpse of life away from the farm. One of the surprising things was when I went to boarding school was that I had my first hot shower when I was 14 at boarding school. That was a surprise, just to turn on the bloody water and get a hot shower. I mean, on the farm we had limited water. What you could put in a dish and you'd wash yourself. But to have a bloody shower, it was bloody God. We had this control line flying where you had there's two wires that went into the plane and they operated and you had a bloody little engine that you'd start, you'd hit your fingers and all that. You'd go round and round. We'd have to just come back round like this. Nah, it was bloody expensive, eh? I mean, I lived on silver coins, mate, out of my father's pocket. I mean, that's as much money as I had until I was 23. I have 3 children, Alison, Alana, and Greg. All went to university. My Alison became a television journalist and worked on The Money Show for some time. She then moved to Sydney and married an eye surgeon. She has 2 children. One of them is a lawyer. The other is in IT. My son is a geologist, and my other daughter, Alana, did a law degree, a diploma of education. Currently, I fly occasionally with my son. We have an aircraft based in Tugurawa. I'm also involved in Probus, a club of retired business people. I have been vice president and president of the club, and I've also set up the audio-visual presentation for all the meetings for the last 5 years. Well, it's significant that my mother's village was approximately 10 miles from where the Colossus was. So they would have been involved. My forebears would have been involved in the building of it, most likely. You know where it rose from? That apparently there was some device for climbing up walls made out of metal that people who attacked Rhodes brought to Rhodes to scale the walls. And it was made out of metal, and they used the metal and built the Colossus. The Colossus was 300 BC. It was knocked down by an earthquake. And then they sold the metal to Arab merchants, apparently. They came with camels and took the pieces away. Well, it's a very important part of the history. It's probably a unifying. For a community to run smoothly, you need some unifying things. You need to have a unified culture where people agree on what the rules are of living. And so you need symbols of that unity, and I think that would be a symbol. So my life and my achievements is a reflection of the investment my parents made in the family's future. They demonstrated hard work and perseverance, and I think that background served us well in what we did. It was certainly an example that was worth following. And I think that applies to a lot of people who come to Australia with the opportunities it provides. In retirement, it's satisfying to know that I have made a significant contribution to this country